Welcome back to Sparks of Joy Studio. I'm Natalie, and in today's video, we will be repurposing 3 Amazon mailers into some pretty functional and fun things. Let's get started. The first thing you're going to want to do is remove any of the labels that you may have on your Amazon mailer. This is not necessarily the easiest of things, and you will notice that for some of these more corrugated or layered bags, I do end up ripping it into the bag a little bit, and that's okay. I'm going to find a solution for that. I also had this other mailer that actually was very thin, and it was almost like pulling apart a decoupage or a napkin to decoupage. It came off pretty easily, but I did have multiple layers that I had to pull back. For the first 2 mailers that had that padding on the inside or in between the 2 layers of the bag, I'm going to be painting them. So the first one is going to be painted with Eden, which is a new DIY paint color. It's this beautiful, very deep green, but I feel like it does have more of a spring undertone rather than like Christmas green, if that makes sense. So I'm going to paint both sides of this in this color, and it will get into that little like ripped part, like where there's almost like a hole, but that's okay. There is still some extra paper on the other side. The inside of the bag is still intact. For the other bag, I only painted one side of it, and I'm using this beautiful light buttercream like yellow that I created a few weeks back when I did a collaboration with Kathy from Waste Not Upcycled. So I'm going to paint just the one side. I do need to give it 2 coats, whereas with the green I only needed 1 coat of that paint to obtain full coverage. So once that's done, I'm going to set these aside to dry, and we're actually going to start by working on the first project, which is that thinner paper. I was able to tear this paper down to size, and I actually sized it to be the same height as this jelly jar that I had saved from the trash as well. And I'm going to be using this Gorilla adhesive glue. It is a spray, and I'm going to be spraying it directly onto my jelly jar so that I can wrap this paper directly around. I could use other types of maybe decoupage medium or something else, but for this project I figured this would be easy and also help maintain the paper feel of the bag, that it wasn't going to feel like hardened by the decoupage medium, if that makes sense. So I'm going to go around. It actually is very easy to do this. You just spray it on, and just like when you're decoupaging, you want to do this in sections. So you spray a section, you roll it on, spray the next section, roll it. The other cool thing about this adhesive is while that adhesive was still sticky, while that spray glue was still sticky, I was able to manipulate the base of the bag so that it kind of wrapped perfectly around that more tapered edge at the bottom. I molded the top of that paper as well around the rim of the jar, but I am going to be adding some twine or ribbon later in this project. In all of today's projects, we will be using Connie's Lines and Designs decoupage paper, and I'm going to be doing all floral prints today. This first paper is called 3x5 Watercolor Floral, and I am taking my artist brush and dipping it in some water so that I can create a more jagged and natural edge all around that paper. I really like using this effect, especially with the rice paper, because you get this much more textured edge, even more than when you're using something like Royce's decoupage paper, which is more of a tissue paper feel to it. You can find Connie over at The Painted Photographer, and she actually has even lives that she does where she shows you kind of her techniques that she uses when she is painting with the DIY clay-based paint, which is what she uses to create this decoupage paper. And guess what? It's Whiskey Wednesday. So head on over to her channel and hit that notification bell so you know when she goes live tonight. For that rice paper that we just tore from the set, I am going to want to paint the back in a white paint just so that it pops a little bit off of that Amazon mailer bag paper that we have around our jar. Be careful about using a dry brush. I have used a wet brush before, and sometimes when I do that, some of the paint will bleed through to the front and it will kind of distort your image. So just something to think about, something that I noticed more recently when I was working on some projects. Once that paint was dry, I came back with my jar and I have some liquid patina, which I'm using in my decoupage medium for this project. And I'm going to be decoupaging that image right onto the front of the jar. I was careful to make sure that where I had kind of put the two edges together, that remained kind of on the opposite end of this jar, so it functioned as like the back. I am going to lay down that liquid patina, and then I misted my paper very lightly so that I was able to kind of smooth it onto the jar without difficulty. Once I have that on, I am coming back with the liquid patina and I am going to cover the entire image, going off of the image onto the paper just to make sure it is fully glued down to my jar. I kept this project very simple. I just grabbed some rope from my stash. It's this more knotted and like not as like heavy rope. I don't know how to explain it. And I pulled it apart so that I had just a piece of it. And then once I had it wrapped around and knotted very tightly around the rim of the jar, I cut it and frayed those edges a bit just to give it a little bit more pizzazz. For the next project, we will be using one of these two 5x7 tulips. Just like before, I'm taking my artist brush and some water and I am going to very carefully kind of rip it down the middle so that I can separate the two. I was going back and forth about which of the two I wanted to use. I even thought about making my next project reversible, but I ended up with this one, the 5x7 Tulip Dream. Typically, I would want to use this part that has the edge already, but I'm not going to do that for this project. I do seal my paint with a polyacrylic sealer so that it doesn't bleed through when we begin to decoupage. I typically don't use these foam brushes, but I had one sitting in my paint cup and I just decided to use it to have one less paintbrush to wash. But as I was going through this, what I typically will do when I'm finished using these sponge brushes is I will pop off the top, throw it away, and keep the wooden handle to use for another project. Well, when I did that, I thought about the idea of using it as a handle, but it doesn't have holes on both sides. However, I do have something in my stash that does. I'm using that Gorilla Glue spray again, and I am spraying it onto the mailer bag and then taking this ripped drop cloth that I got and having it spread all the way across the bag. What you'll see is that these frayed edges is exactly the look I was going for. It reminded me of what the rice paper looks like when you use that artist brush. I decided to use some of the StazOn ink in the color Timber. I went back and forth about using black or brown, but I figured I typically will use black and gray, so I thought that I would use brown for this project today. I am stamping the Kindest Regards stamp set by IOD, and I am going to be placing that onto the drop cloth and pressing down pretty firmly to ensure that we're getting a good imprint. I re-ink my stamp pad so I can get the font to go all the way up to the top of that drop cloth. Then I grabbed some decoupage matte, decoupage medium for this project, and I'm going to start by putting the decoupage medium on to the paper directly. So I am painting it right onto that paint. I will say that when I did this, it also functions as a sealer, so I think it did more of a job of sealing the paint in than it actually did getting it ready to be able to stick onto my drop cloth. Because of that, I will end up using the decoupage medium on both the drop cloth as well as that paper. Here is that little handle that I mentioned before that I had in my stash. I'm going to just get some dark wax by DIY and wipe it on, wipe it back, and then take my twine and string it through this to make the handle. Remember my husband's jeans from last week's video? Well, today we're going to be using the other pocket and some other parts of these jeans to finish up our last mailer bag. I measured out how much of the pants, the pant leg, I needed for this part of the project, and now I'm just going to cut across, and then I'm actually going to cut down that seam so that I can open up the pant leg and go all the way across the mailer bag. I did use this method to kind of fix the issue that we had with some of that part of the bag ripping. I originally considered putting the jean pocket on this side where the yellow was, but you will see that I decided against it. I am taking a piece of sandpaper just to rough up the edges of the denim. I also went back around the edges and added some decoupage medium where some of that adhesive had not stuck the way that I expected. On this project, we will be using the 5x7 Oopsie-Daisy, and it is so adorable. I am going to start by laying it down and positioning it so that it kind of looks like it's sitting inside of the pocket once I have everything adhered down. Then I grab my spray adhesive and spray it all the way across the jeans that are on the mailer bag and place down my decoupage paper. Now this has already been painted in white on the back just to ensure that all of the beautiful detail within this decoupage paper shines. And now I'm going to be spraying again and laying down the jean pocket right in front, and I actually have a functional pocket as well as the mailer bag pocket behind it. I found some additional embellishments, including this white lace that was really just down to a couple strips, and it was just enough to embellish the front of this pocket as well as the side where that crease is or where that seam is. And then I decided to add some burlap to the right of that just to give it some added effect. I felt like that jean material all the way over to the right of that lace just didn't look right the way that it was. So I decided putting that burlap on there would kind of be the perfect finishing touch. Now, not only do we have a functional bag that can be used as like a gift bag or a mail holder, but also something that looks beautiful as a backdrop within a vignette. I have a variety of Connie's papers available on my website. If you go to my shop, click decoupage paper, and you will see all of the different beautiful papers that are available in my shop at this time. And since this is the very first time I am launching this paper on my website, I have an extra special deal for you. Buy any 3 papers and earn this free gift: 5 wood tags and a scrap piece of wood. Happy shopping, happy creating. See you next time.